Welcome to Women Disrupting, a podcast amplifying the voice of women who are disrupting the status quo to create a more equitable, united, and peaceful world.
Kate Waterfall Hill isn't your typical leadership coach. It's true to say she is a woman disrupting. Through comedy, Kate challenges leadership paradigms that are no longer serving us. In this episode, we discuss her newly released book, How to Lead, how she's used her signature blend of humour and expertise to create a huge following on TikTok, her alter ego, Linda, and how one of her most viral TikTok videos ended up backfiring. Enjoy. Welcome, Kate Waterfall Hill, to the Women Disrupting podcast. Obviously, you are on it today because you are another woman disrupting the leadership space. So tell me, Kate, what is it you do?
Very good question, because it's not just one thing. So my main job is leadership coach. That's how I earn the bulk of my income. But I also do content creation because I have a alter ego character called Linda the Bad Manager. And I do skits about people doing management badly and hopefully inspiring people to lead better by showing them what not to do. And that comedy or satire, parody, whatever you want to call it, has captured the imagination of some brands. So some people come and ask me to do videos for them for branded stuff. So I get some income that way. But mostly I'm a leadership coach. Oh, and an author now. Yes, I've got my book. Yeah.
Which is just out recently called
Yes.
How to Lead.
How to Lead. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
And just give us a very quick synopsis of what that book's about.
Well, I've got loads of leadership books and I love reading leadership books, but a lot of them are very concept based. So they sort of talk about one particular angle of leadership. So, Brené Brown and Simon Sinek, absolutely love them, but they're not a real handbook. And what I wanted was a step-by-step guide that leaders and managers could have by their side, either digitally or physically, and they could wake up in the morning and think, oh my goodness, I've got to speak to Yasmin about her poor behavior or whatever it is, underperformance. I don't know how to phrase it. I know it's going to go badly and I'm feeling really nervous about it. I know I'll look in the book and I'll find a guideline and there'll be a checklist there of things I can say, how to put it, how to set it up and how to make it land well. So it's literally a step-by-step guide for everything you could want to know about leadership, whether it's inspiring and motivating better performance, coaching for good performance. That's obviously another passion of yours and mine. But also managing underperformance, managing conflict, and also managing yourself, because I think that's part of leadership is actually being able to be self-aware enough to know when there's, maybe a gap between where you are now and where you'd like to be and how to fill that gap and be a really intentional leader that shows up with the end result in mind, knowing that you want to focus on positive outcomes and influencing positive change and how you're going to do that in the best way. So that wasn't a very short synopsis, was it? I apologize.
It's great to share that just so I can understand, I guess, the journey you've been on, because it sounds like the Linda skits help to draw our attention to problems.
Yes.
And now you're creating some solutions. So you're not just moaning, actually, you're going, well, actually, this is the problem, here's the solution.
Yeah, and actually that was driven by comments that I've had from followers saying, a few people have written to me saying, love your stuff, it's really funny and engaging and it makes me cringe because sometimes I'm like Linda or sometimes my boss is like Linda, but actually, what should we do instead? Can you give us some help? So I have a free newsletter, which goes out every week. But I thought, yeah, that's a fair point. That I could write a book because I've got a course. I do some leadership, effectively training, but it's group coaching. So I have the material, I have the knowledge, and I have lots of workshops that I do. And I thought, well, if I can condense them down into an appetizing way of being a better leader into a book, then I could do that. So there it is.
Amazing. So what made you want to challenge, I guess, bad leadership?
Well, I see it so often. And to be fair, I'm not pointing the finger and saying I'm perfect because, I was 15 years running a marketing agency with 60 people. And to start with, I was only 29 when I became managing director. So I had a fairly accelerated leadership journey myself without any coaching or training. And I made loads of mistakes along the way. I'd be happy to admit that, but also learned a lot along the way. And managing people who are older than you is challenging. People who've got more experience. I joined an agency as a graduate, and the people on the board were the same people who were on the board when I was their boss. When I came from being the effectively like an intern straight up to being managing director. So that was interesting. But the reason I'm so passionate about leadership is because it has such an impact. So not only to the strategy and the decision making of the business, which is evident. That's what the leaders need to be doing, but also the impact they have on their people day to day. Because I don't know about you, but I can remember my first ever proper performance appraisal. It was with the then managing director, who was the founder of the agency, and my account director. So I was an account executive. So the two of them were sitting there, and I can remember where they were sitting. I remember what the room looked like and everything about it. Because your performance appraisal with your line manager, particularly when you're junior, is really important. You feel really nervous and really like, oh, what are they going to say? And it's the first time you've ever had live feedback. Before that, you get reports from your school teachers. You don't get it face to face. It's quite daunting, isn't it? So we have a responsibility as leaders to take that really seriously, because our people are taking it seriously. You've got their careers in your hands. So we should be listening to our people, interested in what's going on in their lives and in their working lives, and helping them develop and nurture them to better performance. And it's not just about telling people what to do. It's about inspiring them to feel engaged and empowered and motivated. And so I just think there's quite a responsibility on the shoulders of leaders to get that right. And the joy of getting it right is amazing. When you get leadership right and you have the people in your team looking to you and sort of hanging on your every word, how fantastic is that? It's such a joy. But so often people feel management is a burden, particularly the younger generation coming through. I'm hearing, I haven't got any statistical evidence for it, but I'm hearing that a lot of Gen Z community are shying away from wanting to be managers because of the mistakes of their managers, and they see how hard it is and how they're working ridiculously long hours, and they've got these huge responsibilities on their shoulders. Why would I want that? I just want to be a good individual contributor. I just want to be good at what I do, deliver what I need for the business or the organization, take my salary and go and enjoy my life. So I think we, as coaches, and it'd be interesting to see what you think of it, whether you share this view or not. I think it's a gift we can give people to find that joy in leadership again, and to recognize the responsibility, but not feel it heavy like a burden. Feel it like a privilege. So yeah, that's I guess what I'm trying to do. I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, no, it certainly just shines a bit of light on the motivation for doing this.
Yeah.
But I'm also curious, the skits that you do that are very funny, and I've shared with you that I came across your skit on TikTok when I was dabbling in TikTok myself quite unsuccessfully, and I was quite surprised to see that sort of genre, leadership, professional leadership, explored and parodied on TikTok. And I think it resonated because the scenarios for me were sort of very real. I've come across quite a lot of those in my experience. Are they scenarios that people have told you about, or have you observed those firsthand in your leadership experience?
A complete mixture, actually.
Okay.
So some of them are things that I've done myself, or have seen or had done to me in my my marketing career. And then my second career was I was a small business management consultant. So I was working alongside CEO founders who'd started their businesses, passionate about them, and then needed not a partner exactly, but a sounding board and a confidant, somebody who could help them with business improvement, sometimes marketing, lots of HR, and looking at pricing, exit strategies, and things like that. So it was a brilliant portfolio career, and I really enjoyed it. But it became more and more and more HR, and then I was looking for something different. So that's when I pivoted to leadership coaching. But in my consultancy career, I was sitting on boards of multiple businesses, going to meetings every day, and seeing these mishaps happening. And when I started doing TikTok, I was quite, open about it. And sometimes people would laugh and say, "Oh gosh, you better mind what I say, because otherwise it'll be on TikTok tomorrow." And it's true, And sometimes I remember going into one office, and the finance manager who sat near the front door, she saw me coming in, and she said, "Kate," she said, "Is that one you did yesterday? Was that our boss?" I was like, "Yes, don't tell anyone." She said, "Oh yeah, right." Because he'd notoriously done that thing, whatever it was that I was taking the mickey out of that day. But a lot of it is taken from messages that people send me privately saying, could you do a video about this? Don't tell him I said so, or her I said so, type of thing. And other times it's people making comments on existing videos that spurs another thought in me that I think, yeah, that would be good. That would be another video. But recently I've actually asked for people to send me things in about promotions. So I recognize that quite often companies give people a promotion, but they just mishandle it. So they either give them the promotion by stealth, just sort of make them do more and more work. So they're effectively working a level up, but are not given the title or the money. Or they're given the promotion, say, oh, look, you're now senior, blah, blah, blah. No money, no support, no training.
Yeah.
Or they say, oh, yes, we think we're going to promote you. You can act up because your manager's left. Act up in the manager position. You'll probably get it in 3 months' time. And then in 3 months' time, they recruit somebody from outside and you're back down again. So loads of things like that were coming up.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I could do some videos about that. Oh, I know. I'll ask my followers if they've got any other ideas. I was literally inundated. I can't do as many videos as I've had suggestions because it would just end up being a bit too boring about just doing about promotions. So I've got a series called Promotion Red Flags. I've recorded about 6 of them already. I've put, I think, 1 or 2 out on TikTok, but they're there in the waiting in the wings to go. So some of it's like that. Some of it's people sending me stuff in, and when they're sending me the ideas, say, what about this? And I go back to them and say, did this happen to you? Because this sounds awful. And they go, that happened to me. And I've left there now and I'm in a much better place. Or yes, it happened to me, but I got the promotion and I got the pay rise in the end, or I didn't and I'm thinking of leaving. So yeah, nearly all of the messages I get are real life things. And that's what's so sad, that so many people are living or working in these situations that they're deeply unhappy about, and sometimes with really bad side effects of mental health issues, anxiety and depression, and it's so it could be solved by leaders and managers having some training.
Yeah. As you were talking there about the promotion theme, honestly, the cogs were turning in my head, and I was just recalling all sorts, because you're right, it's probably one of the things that's handled so badly. I wonder if you're allowed to share maybe, the feedback that you got from your followers. Was there a common theme that a lot of people were sharing with you?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably just bad communication,
right.
just not thinking through the implications. So another one is you get the promotion, but nobody gets told. So your team don't realize that you're now their manager. And then the person's too embarrassed to say. So they're sort of trying to manage by stealth, I'm just interested in what you were doing. Why? What's it got to do with you? You're my peer. Yeah. Well, I'm sort of not your peer anymore because I've been told I'm your manager. Well, nobody's told me you're my manager, So so a lot of it is poor communication. Yeah, actually, it's nearly always down to poor communication. Thinking about it, yeah.
It always feels a bit like a secret, doesn't it? There's a lot of secrecy around promotion, and why does there need to be? Yeah,
and then the other thing is things like the boss's favorite gets promoted, and there's no structure. There's no opportunity for people to apply for promotion, and there's no internal process to say, oh look, this person's left. If you'd like to apply for their role, this is how you do it. Really easy to do. And actually, if you do an internal process and people don't apply, other than the one that you've identified that you want, that would be good if they applied, then they get the job. Fair enough. They've got the job. Nobody else wanted it. So that's fine. You get it. But if a couple of other people want the job and you do a very simple, effectively internal recruitment process, you ask them to write down what they would do in their first 60 days in post. You do a short interview based on the competencies of that role, make sure that they're okay for the job, make sure, see whatever skills gaps there might be, how you might fill those. Not that difficult to do. But the beautiful thing about it is when the person who gets appointed, they get appointed fairly. So everyone else is like, okay, she deserved that or he deserved that. Good. And then they also are, they sort of feel like they've earned it. So often when people get promoted, they get imposter syndrome because they think, oh, I shouldn't really be here. Somebody's going to find me out. I just got chosen because I live in the same village as the boss, or, my uncle's the stakeholder's friend or whatever. And they very, very rarely, lots of people think they're not worthy of their role. But if you've got them to go through a bit of a process, a selection procedure, then they can stand up tall in the fact they've got the role, and everybody else will respect them. So you're setting them up for success, which is a lovely thing to do when somebody's getting promoted. The shame of it is that people get promoted and it's bodged, it's handled badly, communicated badly, just handled in a bad way, and that poor person's off to a bad start before they've even started, before they've even got going.
Yeah, it sounds like common sense. Set up a process and go through it, but as we know, it isn't common sense that's well applied.
Yes, and common sense is the least common sense.
This is true. I wonder if we were to look at the whole of your content now and look at maybe if you could share which skit has had the most engagement and why do you think that was?
Well, the one that got the most engagement was probably the least typical.
Oh.
So and it's slightly backfired, but I'll tell you, it was quite amusing. So there's a TikTok creator in the States called Karen, and she's a millennial manager. I think she calls herself Karen the Millennial Manager, and she does skits on managing, being a young manager, and some of them are skits and some of them are genuine messages, and there's a bit of a mixture. Anyway, she was doing one straight to camera. I'm a millennial manager, and if you want to take some paid time off, that's fine. You don't need to tell me why, just book it. I'm a millennial manager, and if you want to go and pick up your kids from school in the middle of the day, that's fine with me as long as you get your work done. So all that sort of stuff. So very, very open-minded, very, very, new era style of management. So I knew that my character Linda, who's very old style of management, although I'm Gen X, Linda is definitely a boomer, even though we look the same. But she, her attitude is definitely a boomer attitude. I had her doing a duet, so a side by side. So the video screen is split between Karen and me, and I'm not speaking, but I'm going like this the whole way through. Just you can't see, can you? So it's a podcast. I'm rolling my eyes and tutting. Obviously, you can see I'm tutting. And then just at the end, I get up in disgust and I say a swear word. You can see my mouth moving in the capacity. It's very obvious that I'm like completely fed up with it. Anyway, that one I did literally without a second thought. I did it in one take. Didn't edit it because you can't when you're doing a duet. Posted it. Went to a meeting. Came out of the meeting and it was already on like 2 million views. I was like,
oh my God.
Oh, okay. Oh, what's happened here? Anyway, it got to 5.7 million views, I think it's at now. And a lot of them were people who didn't realize I was doing a skit. So they were all having a go saying, you boomers need to retire already. Why don't you die already, you stupid old woman? Really aggressive, a lot of them. And they hadn't realized, because I just thought, well, my followers would get it because they'd know that I'm Linda the bad manager and that's fine. But of course, it just because it said millennial manager in, and Karen was already had a good number of followers, it just went viral without context. Even though I put satire, comedy all over, and I'd put in lots of comments in the comment section. This is satire, this is comedy. Look at my other stuff. And some people got it, but lots of people were really aggressive. But I did get 5,000 new followers from it. So the people who got it got it.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's so interesting, isn't it? Yeah. And just goes to show how, in some cases the humour just doesn't land, does it, with a certain audience? I would just thought it was obvious, but and
interestingly, it was mostly overnight that I got the most viewers. So it went on for weeks, and so I know it's mostly the America who just didn't get the humour. Yeah, and then I had another one that kicked off. I won't go into it because it's too complicated, but that kicked off people thinking that I was anti-Trump because there's a woman called Linda in Florida who's anti-Trump. And so one of my videos for some reason got associated with her. And I got loads of people saying, you're an awful person and you'll go to hell and Jesus knows who you are and things like this. And that was all Americans, yeah.
Oh,
and
God.
One saying, listening to her accent, I think she's probably an illegal immigrant. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm actually in England and I'm English.
To Americans, to some Americans, that sounds it sounds like you're an immigrant. Yeah. I mean, how baffling, but also actually, as you're talking about this, I'm in awe of you that you've had the courage to do this, because let's face it, like throwing yourself into TikTok, which, as you've just proved, can be successful but equally quite a cruel place. Where do you get the courage to do that and sustain doing it?
Yeah, For me, it was easy to do TikTok because I didn't think anybody that in my social circle or in my client base would watch it. I thought it was all about the kids. I've got young adult kids, and they were on TikTok, and I thought, oh, it'll all be their age group, and I'll just be having a bit of fun. So I sort of thought it was going to go under the radar, and then obviously it didn't. And then literally in the first week, I had 2 men actually reach out to me to say, "Love what you're doing on TikTok." Literally the first week, would you coach me? And they were proper, businessmen. But one has his own business, the other one's very senior clinical digital transformation IT lead. And and actually the first one, the one with his own business, I'm still coaching, over a year later. So there are proper grown-ups who look at TikTok, but the good thing is that the people who my stuff resonates with are my type of people, and the people who don't get it they just scroll on by. And I guess just thanks to actually some coaching from my kids, don't worry about it. These people are people you're never going to meet. They're not in your target audience. Don't worry. Don't lose any sleep over it. The one that I mentioned before, the millennial manager one, I was getting quite irritated, that people were being so mean. And I was writing back to them saying, please look at my other videos. I'm doing comedy, but I'm actually a leadership coach, and, please look at it. And some people wrote back and apologized and said, I'll take my comment down. I'm sorry. I didn't read it before amazingly, people weren't reading the other comments before they commented. Strange. But the funny thing is, I didn't have any qualms, and I still don't, about doing stuff on TikTok. It either sticks or, it either works or it doesn't, and that's fine. Where I do have a tiny bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Reticence is posting on LinkedIn, bizarrely, because that should be my home, shouldn't it? I'm a leadership coach. I've worked in business for over 30 years. I should feel very comfortable on LinkedIn. But there's quite a lot of judgment that goes on in LinkedIn. In fact, I was speaking to somebody, a potential client prospect who was talking to me about me doing speaking at his company conference, quite a big, it was a high street bank. And I said, oh, should we connect on LinkedIn at the end of the call? And he said, oh, I don't really like LinkedIn. It's so full of people trying to make leadership analogies out of what happened on their dog walk. It drives me mad. And I thought, oh God, that's exactly what I do. I'm forever making analogies about leadership, what happened on my dog walk. And so I sort of slightly got a bit of a complex about it. And then people, some people are very sniffy about sharing private things, aren't they? Say, look, you should put this on Facebook, not on LinkedIn. This is a business forum. And, I wonder whether people think, oh, why? Occasionally I put the skits on. I need to do that maybe once a week. And I do it at the weekend because I think maybe I won't be interrupting the people who are trying to be very corporate and busy, but the people who still like it will see it at the weekend. Yeah, so I'm a bit jumpy. I don't know why. I am feeling more self-conscious, I think, on LinkedIn than anything else.
Yeah, that's so interesting. 2 things. I mean, I had the same preconception. Grown-ups don't go on TikTok. The professionals that I'm trying to work with don't go on TikTok. It's underground, totally. But you've just obviously shared that's not the case. And LinkedIn is an interesting place. But I guess my question now is, who's making up these walls?
Yeah, it's a really good question. That's a really good question. I should use that in coaching, actually. That is a really good question. Yeah, it's all us, isn't it? It's all in our heads. And I think the thing that released me from too much self-consciousness was my business coach, Joanna Lott, who's a great coach for coaches. And she said to me what I alluded to earlier, actually, which was the people who you're trying to reach, that the point of doing your coaching is to do meaningful work, to nurture talent, to help people unlock the joy of leadership. That's my sort of reason for being on this planet, I think. And she said there are going to be people out there who need you, but if they don't know about you, if they can't see you, if you're not visible, if they don't know, like, and trust you because of what you're doing on social media or elsewhere, it doesn't have to be social media. It could be, public speaking. It could be going to events. It could be networking, whatever you want. But if they can't see you, then they can't find you. So you're doing them a disservice if you're not visible. And then I was saying, oh, what about my ex-colleagues in the marketing agency, who probably labelled me as slightly mumsy at the time because I was, had young children and I was a bit, I wasn't looking my best or feeling my best. I was probably a bit sort of, in their eyes anyway, dowdy. Hopefully I've reinvented myself and have a new lease of life now. But I wonder whether they, I was worried that they would be thinking, well, who's she to be a leadership coach? she was our our managing director when she was here, but she was only in her 30s, and now here she is thinking she's some guru. I don't think I'm a guru, by the way. So yes, I had that in my mind, and she was saying, well, why does it matter what they think? They're probably either not going to see it because the algorithm only shows things to people who are interested in you, doesn't it? Mostly. And if they scroll on by once, then they won't see it again. If they dwell on it and have a look at it and like it and comment, then they'll see you again. So that's fine. People who interact with you and who want to see you will see you, and people who won't. So that really released me from that fear.
Yeah, definitely. And great that it did, because it means that you do your thing and keep disrupting the leadership space, which is, I think, 100% what we need. I wonder, with our listeners who are mainly women who are current leaders or aspiring leaders, are there any common themes that you see through your followers who are women, or the women that you coach? And if there are, what are they in terms of sort of barriers to promotion and progressing as a leader?
Yeah. So there are definitely some common themes, but I wouldn't say that everyone's like this. I don't like too many generalizations, but for the purpose of the question, often it's about confidence and perfectionism and finding it difficult to let go. So those are probably the three things that come up most often. And it's really unlocking, the woman's confidence to be able to say, what are your values and what are your strengths and where can you lean in? Don't try and be like somebody else, or like maybe you've seen in your role model. You've just got to be true to yourself, because otherwise it's obvious. You can't mask all the time. You can't be trying to be somebody else all the time. But if you know who you are and what's really important to you, what your core principles and firmly held beliefs are, then you can stand up tall in those and know that the decisions you make and the boundaries you put in place and the dilemmas that you face, you can cut through it all by knowing who you are and knowing your values. So that's one area in terms of confidence. I also talk to them about, my personal belief actually is that the world has changed a lot in the last 20 years in terms of management. Certainly, and even more so in the last 5 years, particularly since COVID. The expectations of our teams are different. So whereas in the old days, 20 years ago, we could say, this is what you do, go away and do it. Come and find me if you've got any questions. And that was good enough. Now, people are expecting and need, quite rightly, and therefore perform better if they've got a purpose, if they understand the why. The old thing about, Simon Sinek says about, understand your why, start with that. And everybody needs to feel that they understand the overall big picture of why, but also their team's purpose and their own individual reason for being there, how they fit into the overall picture. So understanding the why, but also being nurtured, being coached to enable you to work out the how for yourself. So the leader setting out the why, the manager setting out the what, the actual expectations of the outcomes, and then the coach part of you. So this is all these the three things are in one person. Is coaching the person to find the solution themselves. So as before it would be command and control, now it's align and enable. And I actually think this plays really, really helpfully to female leaders, because it's our natural way of being. We're naturally, not every female, but lots of women are better attuned to emotional intelligence, to listening actively, to listening to understand rather than listening to reply. And the temptation is to think, right, I'm a leader, so I've got to command this meeting room. I've got to identify the issue and the solution and then send my people off to go and do it. Well, actually, a much, much better way, and that's actually more of a feminine way of doing it, and I encourage my male clients to take on this persona too, is to listen first, to understand what the team thinks is the issue, to eke out of them what they might think are the solutions, and then to enable them to go off and do it. And they're much more likely to be vested in have a vested interest in the outcome if they've had a part in creating the solution. So actually, I think this now is a really good time to be a female leader. And it's just a case of building enough confidence, having the tools and techniques. And, dare I say, without wishing to sound like I'm doing an advert, have some coaching to get you to a situation where you feel really confident and you're able to step into your innate strengths and values and show up authentically as the leader you want to be, creating these really good, lovely, these really fantastic positive outcomes.
And on that note of have some coaching and what you previously said about finding your why, I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on this one, because something that comes up in my clients who are either aspiring or current women leaders in different sectors is, I don't know what my purpose is. And they really struggle despite, I mean, I hope it's not my poor coaching, but despite me drawing upon a range of tools. And it made me think the other day, I think I was listening to, maybe it was Liz Gilbert, who was saying something along the lines, and I'm going to really badly paraphrase her here, but maybe sometimes people don't have a purpose and we spend too much time trying to think, why am I here on this planet? And actually just go with the flow. What are your thoughts on that? Because that sort of goes a bit against what Simon Sinek says and the why.
Yeah, I get what you mean, but I still think that everybody has a set of values, and it might be that they just haven't had the coaching or the format within which to solidify those and formulate them. So in actual fact, I did a values workshop yesterday with my Leadership Accelerator group. And it's quite difficult to do as a group, but what I was trying to do was just give them the taste of it so they can go off and do it on their own. It takes a lot of self-reflection. So the first bit I talk to people about is, when were you at your happiest? When were you in flow? When were you feeling most confident? When were you feeling your absolute self, where you didn't have to feel like you were second guessing everything, when you can get out of your head and actually be the person you want to be. And it might be that they haven't felt that yet, which is obviously a shame. But generally speaking, most people have a time in their lives, and it might be when they were a student or when they were traveling or in between jobs. It doesn't necessarily mean in their career, but actually, what was it about that time? And if it was in a job, what was it about that? What was it about the team? What was it about the leader? What was it about the company or the organization and what it did? And try to capture some of the words that come to mind in a sort of free flow state. So that's the first part of it. And there's lots of other elements to finding your values, but the values and purpose are linked, but are slightly separate. So you could have a value of, say, honesty and integrity, and that doesn't necessarily mean you have a purpose about that. But it could drive your decisions in terms of, what you say yes and no to. If I then asked you, would you like to come and rob a bank with me next week? You'd know pretty quickly if honesty and integrity was one of your values that you'd say no. You wouldn't have to think about it too hard. And the same for lots of different values. So for me, it's less about a personal mission, a life mission, and it's more about just knowing who you are, knowing what's important to you, and knowing the sorts of things that you'd fight for, if you know what I mean. The things that you'd be willing to say, no, that's not okay. I'm not going to do that, or I feel so strongly about this, I am going to do this. And that's the other thing I say to people. You might feel out of alignment with your organization because your values and the organization's values don't match. But what could you do about that? Could you be the champion of change? Could you go and lobby for something different? If you're really passionate about the environment and sustainability, could you go to management and say, hey, we don't have a ESG policy, or we don't have a net zero policy. Can I be part of a committee that does that? Be the champion. You have agency, but you don't have it. It's hard to have agency if you don't know what you care about.
Yeah.
So if you establish your values, then you know what you care about.
Yeah. So maybe sometimes the find your purpose, it's a language thing, is what I'm hearing. Actually, You're talking more about values and what's important to you, which I think would probably resonate with the ones who are getting stuck on the word purpose. Is there I've got a few that I can recommend, but I want to know what's worked with your clients. Is there a structured exercise that you could refer listeners to if they wanted to sort of explore that in a bit more depth?
Yeah, well, I actually have a Find Your Purpose module, it's called, as part of my coaching program. So my one-to-one clients get that as a free module in their 6-month program. And then I do a sort of a shortened version of it for clients on my Leadership Accelerator program. We did the workshop last night. It's actually in my book. The very basic model of it is in the book. But if none of those sort of hit you, then a strengths finder, which I quite like, is called, which isn't the same as values, but it's similar, is called VIA Strengths Finder, and you can just Google that. It's a free questionnaire. It doesn't take long to do. It's a quiz, really. And what I like about it is that it gives you 24 strengths, and everybody has the same 24 strengths. We just have them in a different order. And I quite like that it's not saying these are your weaknesses, because I think people get so hung up on their weaknesses. because we're designed to do that. We're designed to try to mitigate risk, to look for danger. And so we tend to focus on the negative. So when somebody gives you feedback and says, hey, Yasmin, you did a great job on that project last week, but actually, do you know what, the finances were a bit out of whack, and I think you could have been better on your budgeting. All you hear is that last bit. The person said you were doing really well. So I encourage people to say something along, to try and avoid the word but. Hey, Yasmin, you did a great job on that project. It was really, really good. What would have been even better, and maybe we could try next time, is to really tighten up our attention to the budget. And it's just a tiny change, but it makes a huge difference. And I think it's the same with the Strengths Finder. If you feel, there are some people who I coach who I've done the VIA Strengths Finder with, and they immediately tell me what their bottom 5 are. I say, I'm not interested in your bottom 5. I'm interested in your top 5. Because in the same way that you wouldn't pay for a football coach for your 14-year-old who was showing real promise at tennis but wasn't that good at football, you wouldn't try and get them good at football. You'd put all the money you had into a really good tennis coach, and go with their passion, go with the thing that they're really interested in and the thing that they're showing promise about. And it's the same at work. Why do we try and fill the gaps of our weaknesses when actually we should be leaning into our strengths?
My last question, if anyone's listening right now and is in a scenario where they're being led badly and they don't quite know what to do about it, what would be your best piece of advice for them?
Slightly depends on the relationship with the manager. Because if you've got somebody who is open to having a conversation, that's one thing. And if you've got somebody who's not, then it's another. So let's assume it's somebody who's open, I would ask to see them, and preferably face to face, and just say, I would love to talk about how we work together, because I'm sure you'd like me to be as engaged and as productive as possible. And I just wonder whether there's a way that we can work that will make that happen. Because at the moment I'm feeling whatever it is you're feeling, overmanaged or left without any direction, or, whatever the thing is. And I'd love some more direction from you. Or I'd like less management from you. So if you've got an open enough relationship, then a conversation, but one without judgment. So, you're not, don't say, well, my advice would be, don't say, you never give me enough, a decent brief, or you're always looking over my shoulder. That's going to be accusatory and judgment. Sounds like it's got lots of judgment in it, very loaded, and it's likely to elicit a not favourable response. But if you say, oh, I feel that I could be left to my own devices a bit more, I'd love some more autonomy. What would give you comfort enough to let me have some more autonomy on this project, or on this specific part of the project, or whatever it is? So have a conversation. If you've got a manager who's literally you can't talk to because they're just a complete, sociopath narcissist, it's a different thing altogether, obviously. And it might be that you go with a colleague who also feels the same about your manager, and you go together to speak to that manager, or you speak to HR, or you speak to a peer of that manager, somebody else senior in the organisation, or even somebody over them. Obviously not ideal, because it can inflame the situation. HR, if you've got a good HR team, when I was in HR, I did absolutely listen to the people and took action. I know lots of people on my TikTok say, don't go to HR, they're just, looking after the company. But, a good HR team should also have the interest of the people at heart, because the people are the business when it comes to it. And then if the issue, it gets too much, then escalate to whoever you need to escalate to. Or if it's an illegal issue, then, whistleblowing, there are whistleblowing organizations that you can, go to. And if all else fails, then, keep campaigning, keep trying. But if it fails, then it might well be that you just need to go somewhere else if you've got somebody who's really, really bad, because how you're treated by your manager is such a huge impact on how much you enjoy your job. And you only get one life. Well, in my opinion, you only get one life. So, we might as well make a good job of it. And actually, Linda, bizarrely, has enabled lots of people to leave their toxic work environments. I get lots of messages from people saying, thank you for doing what you do. You've made me realize that my manager is like Linda and it's not okay. So I've left and I'm now with a lovely manager and I love my job.
That's amazing, isn't it? Yeah, because you become a bit institutionalized, I guess, sometimes if you've especially if you've never seen good leadership, you think, oh, this is normal. And then you see it parodied and you're like, oh, actually, no, this is a joke.
Yeah.
Brilliant. If people wanted to find out more about you and your alter ego, Linda, where can they find you?
If you just Google Kate Waterfall Hill, I come up everywhere. I've got a website, Waterfall Hill, and then everywhere on social media, I'm Kate Waterfall Hill.
Amazing. And I will put those links to your social media platforms in the show notes.
Great.
Kate, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much indeed. I've enjoyed every minute.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. I'm always looking for disruptive women as guests. If you think you'd make a great guest or know anyone who would, then please email me with the details. You can email info@yasminarifcoaching.com. More details in today's show notes. Remember to show up and share your truth, because the world is hungry for women who show up and tell the truth, unafraid and free, expanding to the very edges of who they were always meant to be.